And we are live. Hello and welcome to the Business Octopus live stream. And today, basically, you're stuck with me. Unfortunately, Amanda can't join us today. She's doing something else. But here we are. We are live and we're going to talk about downtime tasks because it's getting to that time of the year where at the end some businesses ramp up towards the end of the year. It might be if you're in a retail business, you need to do lots of sales. You need, people are coming in for lunches at the restaurant or something like that. But for many businesses, particularly in professional services industries, you've got a downturn because people are going on Christmas leave. All of your customers are also shutting down. So things can get a little bit quiet. Now, sometimes if you're entrepreneurial and you're starting out, you might work all the way through, or you might go down to like a skeleton crew and do a couple of tasks. Other businesses have different seasonality. No matter where you are in the cycle, you generally have some seasonality somewhere. So if you run an aircon business, your seasonality is probably more to do with the weather. And so you're going to be in winter, it's going to be your quiet time. And in summer, it's going to be insane because everybody's aircon tends to break when it's hot, or they don't service it while it's cold and while it's quiet. So in this session, we're going to be talking about how to deal with seasonality and what we're going to be doing in the downtime when things aren't going crazy. So no matter what time it is for you, at some point you're going to have a downtime. So here's what we should be doing as business owners, as operators, whatever it is your position is in your company. So first things first. Now, I did mention the restaurant, and there's a little saying in a restaurant is you got time to lean, you got time to clean. Now, that could be true in a retail environment as well. So that kind of means that, where there's no rush, there's no customers around, because that seasonality or that peak and that trough can happen within, the space of a few hours. Obviously you have the morning rush, then it gets quiet. Then you have the lunch rush, then it gets quiet, then presumably a dinner rush, etc. So no matter what's going on, there's always something you can be doing. And in your own business, it's no different. Generally, you're only at the most efficient point when you're under pressure. And that means that you kind of have to be under pressure for a while. Or you have to be motivated, you have to be driven, you have to be continually doing something that is going to benefit you. So having a look at the downtime tasks that you can do, like cleaning, for example, is just a really simple thing. Now, we don't have to go, maybe there's different speeds of things we do. Maybe we have the downtime task, which is just short, quick, down and dirty, get it done. And then you've got something that's a little bit more protracted and planned. Now, for us, the downtime can often happen, for a couple of months. Generally businesses tend to stop making decisions around mid to late November. Then they stop, any activities because people are going on holidays. They don't want to get involved in projects. They want to defer it to next year. And it tends to wind down around about mid-December. And then things pick up again. We start having conversations mid-January when everybody starts to come back. But then, conversations take time to turn into actions, and then things actually take up the slack or then go into production around about sort of late January, early February to mid-February, that sort of range. So, there's quite a period where probably of about maybe 2.5 months, where there's not as much going on as what there is in the peak season. Now, this does not mean that, business can't continue as usual. It doesn't mean that, you can't send people on leave. There's all these little balancing things that you can deploy to make sure you have a more seamless, I guess, end of year or a seasonality kind of management. So, it's not always feasible for people to take leave for forever and a day or extended periods of time. So, in some locations, seasonality happens because, that particular location has a weather concern, or, say, for example, in Darwin, all the way in the north, nothing really happens in the wet season. Everybody's there for the dry season, which lasts about, 7 or 8 months. And the weather's really nice. But then as soon as the wet season hits, it's just muggy, it's horrible. And that seasonality can really, really, hurt. And like tourist businesses have to account for that. So they have to make a lot of money in the peak season to then allow for the drop off or the failing point or the lack of revenue in the off season. So I guess aside from just cleaning, there's a couple of things that you can do. So cleaning is obviously the very short notice, very short kind of thing. Like, and maybe cleaning to you might be wiping down a bench, or it could be doing your books and finances, just some kind of like quick task, emptying out your inbox, cleaning up your calendar, something like that. It does not take a lot of time to do that sort of task. But at some point, you're going to run out of those things to do, and you're going to have to find something a little bit more impactful, a little bit larger. So one thing I would always look at is, what can I prepare? It might be, let's just say I plan on doing some presentations in the new year. And so I might look at doing some preparations for that. And so I might start writing some PowerPoint presentations, equivalents, whatever you use, whether it's Canva, etc. But you're using a system whereby you know that you're going to have to do some kind of presentation later, and so you're putting that together, or you have to do some kind of task, maybe organizing the workshop to be more efficient for the next year, or maybe there's a rush coming and you know that every time that happens that you run out of X, Y, and Z. So you might strategically position them. Like we used to do this in the military. The downtime tasks are dig your shell scrape, clean your weapon, eat your food, and prepare for the battle. So it might be loading more magazines. It might be bringing out wire. There's virtually never a time to sit down and do nothing. And sometimes you might just rest. And yes, that sounds like it's laziness, but no, generally you don't have a lot of time for rest. And so preparing for a battle might mean forcing yourself to have an hour nap at a really obscure time of day to just get a rest in so that you are the best you can possibly be for that battle. So preparation can be very, very valuable. Now, whether that's short-term preparation or long-term, same as the thing with the cleaning, right? Short-term preparation versus long-term preparation means, is it something that you're going to need in the next 5 minutes, or is it something that, takes a little bit longer time to prepare? For example, preparation in a pizza shop would be make some dough. Now, that might sound like an easy thing, but making dough for a pizza is actually quite a lot. Like bakers get up at 3 a.m. to start baking the bread for the day, and they've probably put some flour and some yeast and some water together and have it aging somewhere. Like when I make pizza, I love to make 24-hour dough. That's where I make it the night before. And then, just before I need it, I pull it out and I knead it. Yes, play on words. But I get the dough ready and then I do a few things to it hours before I need it. So over 24 hours is probably like 4 or 5 like interventions, if you will, on that dough until it's ready for when I want to make an amazing feast. But that's kind of what you get to do in quiet time. You get to do those things that take a little bit more preparation, a bit more planning that you don't normally get to do when the pressure is on and it's really, really hard. Another thing you can do is start problem solving bottlenecks. So you got a lot of little things that just hold you up. Maybe someone's, in a digital business, someone's filling out an online form and they get stuck on a field. Well, go and put some help text in there. Go and put some images or some kind of like video, doing this right now. I make time to do a video every week. That's my preparation. And I do it nice and early. It's 8:30 a.m. where I am now, and it's before the morning rush of everything else. So the goal is to, be consistent here. And sometimes if I can't be consistent, I have to, make other arrangements so that the show must go on. So I use my downtime to prepare so that this thing always happens. Now, another thing you can look at is training. Training is a really good way to fix other problems that happen throughout the year. And it could be on the decision someone makes or an accidental, failure. Going back to the pizza shop example, a little bit of training at the end of the year when it's quiet, when there's no one around, might mean that they stuff up less pizzas. They might make 20% less mistakes, which have a significant influence on the profitability of the business. I'm trying to give you simple examples here, but a little bit of training can go a very long way. And it just then means that you don't have the time taken out of your day of people coming up to you every 5 minutes. How do I do this? How do I do that? Training doesn't always have to be immediate. It could be you're writing SOPs, you're building documentation, you are writing down, you are recording videos, you are doing the things that enable you to take more of a step back. So in the next year that you become more prepared, or in the next cycle, you've got more ability to go and do your core function rather than, trying to solve problems, answer people on the fly. It's much easier, and training is preparing is training. So all of that kind of ties in together. Now, another thing that you can do, and I highly recommend that you take a second to do this, because yes, at some point you need to have a rest yourself, right? That is part of preparing. You are preparing your body for the onslaught in the following period. You are getting ready for the busy period in the next year. You need that time to mentally refresh, to reframe, to think about things. And that's where strategic planning comes in. As you are having that mental clarity, you're having that distance and that space to be able to make some decisions, to have some thoughts about things. Strategic planning can be very, very useful in the year, because it allows you to come up with outcomes that you wouldn't necessarily have thought of. When you're so close to the problem, when you're so busy, you don't have the mental capacity to come up with that solution that was just this lightning bolt that hit you, because you just had time to think about it and ponder things and do a bit of research time. Like, strategic planning isn't always just writing some big document. Part of strategic planning is brainstorming, having that thinking time, bringing together other ideas, bringing people together. So strategic planning, theoretically, you should be thinking about more than just yourself. If you have a plan, it just involves you. If you have a strategic plan, that is where your plan interacts against other people's plans. Now, I know that sounds a little bit fluffy, but what that means is you need to pit your plan against your competitors. So you need to look at what your competitors are doing, and maybe it's what your friends are doing, what the government's doing, what the environment's doing. What is it around you that is happening, and how can you change what you're doing to take advantage of that situation? If there's a particular growth that you see in a particular region coming up. So, for example, in Queensland, in Australia right now, we are 6 years from the Olympics. So strategically thinking, we should be trying to position ourselves for that population growth, for that economic growth. So what is it that we could be doing right now to position ourselves to take full advantage of what is going to be a very impactful and long-term change on this region? So a strategic plan will help you to go, what are the things I need to do today? Could I build a business in 6 years' time that takes advantage of that? Maybe they don't have the business today. Maybe it's not as simple as, order something and just do it. Maybe we have to build a market. Maybe we have to do a lot of things. But if we did that, all those things, and we took advantage of, what is going to be quite a transformational event, maybe we'll get ahead. Maybe we'll be a little bit bigger, a little bit better, a little bit more planned, a little bit more profitable, So that's kind of what strategic planning is. I would go starting an ice factory in Iceland, or probably in the Antarctic, that's not really taking advantage of an environment. But if you started selling warm gloves, or thinking of environment, I'm thinking on the fly here, which is never a good thing for a live stream, but here we go. So we know that global warming is happening. So what if you went to Antarctica and started selling canoes because the ice is going to melt? Obviously, there's a lot of generalizations and assumptions there, but the point is that you're taking advantage of something that's coming up, or maybe you're taking advantage of something that's happening in a competitive environment. So maybe your competitor is moving in this direction, but you think that by moving in that direction, you'll stand out better, not necessarily step on their toes, or you're not then competing with them for the same, donut, right? You're trying to build your own new magical thing that you can go for. So, one example of strategic thinking and planning was, believe it or not, the ABBA concert live in China. Now, China has a very different language, has a very different culture. And the company that spent many, many years, like 4 years, 5 years, trying to get um, a concert, a live concert off the ground in China, then they're not competing on Broadway. They're not competing, with every other production company. They're in a whole new market. It was a huge uphill climb, but now they sell out shows with venues that are 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 times bigger than any of the stages on Broadway, and they do it every single night of the week, not just like Monday and a Wednesday. They sell significantly more tickets, and it is absolutely wildly profitable. But they would never have gotten there if they didn't take the strategic step to go and do something a bit different, a bit out of the box, and something that maybe that somebody else isn't doing. So strategic thinking and strategic planning, a little bit big for this session, but that is a very powerful thing that you can be doing during the quiet time. So make sure you spend a bit of time really trying to think outside the box. Try to break your business down into pieces. Think about the other businesses that are around you. Think about your strengths, their weaknesses, and how you can use your strengths to counter their weakness and move into an area that maybe they can't, or do a thing that they can't do. Or maybe it's not necessarily against competitors. Maybe it's environmental. And by environmental, I don't necessarily think talk about plants and trees. Yes, that can be environment as well, but the environment can be the political environment, it can be the economic environment, it can be a number of factors that that surround your business. Anyway, that is a short, quick, down and dirty session for today. Unfortunately, I am on my lonesome, so you just get me. If you've been watching, we do have regular sessions, trainings that we do in the Relevate community. Check out join.relevate.com.au and come and see us. If you've got a question, let us know in the comments. Join the community, pop a comment in there. We'd love to answer you. So thank you for watching. If indeed you still are, please have a great one, and I will see you next time. Make sure you